Welcome to Audit the Audit, where we sort out the who and what and the right and wrong of police interactions. This episode covers public property, auditor conduct, and free speech, and is brought to us by Rowdy Podcast's channel. Be sure to check out the description below and give them the credit that they deserve. Podcaster and First Amendment auditor John Mitchell was conducting an audit inside a police parking lot at the Eden Prairie Police Department in Eden Prairie, Minnesota, when he was contacted by two sergeants for filming inside the lot.
Good, how are you?
Good. Secure part of the lot.
Yeah,
you don't have business, you can't be in here.
I do have business. I'm an investigative journalist.
Okay, still a secured part of the lot.
It's not.
It is.
It's not.
Do you have your ID with you?
I'm not going to give you that.
Okay, you're required to. You're in secured part of the lot. You're going to be trespassed.
So can you let me know where? First off, you can't trespass on public property.
Contrary to popular belief, citizens can, in fact, be trespassed from public property. Just as public employees do not work for any individual taxpayer, public buildings do not belong to any individual member of the public. Generally, courts consider government buildings the property of another for the purposes of trespass laws. For example, in the 2016 Texas Court of Appeals case of Wilson versus State, the court noted that, quote, in a case involving public grounds, the state satisfies the burden of the of another element of the criminal trespass statute by proving, beyond a reasonable doubt, that the complainant has a greater right of possession of the property than does the accused. The authority to dictate who can and cannot enter certain public properties typically rests in the hands of whatever government official presides over said property. However, the legalities become much more complicated when someone in charge of a public building seeks to ban a specific individual from the building while allowing other members of the public to access the building. There are many legal factors to be considered when issuing a trespass against an individual from public property, and each case would likely be considered individually. A court would likely consider the totality of circumstances surrounding a particular trespass before deciding whether the trespass was of legitimate interest to the state or whether the trespass violated the individual's constitutional rights. There is no clear legal precedent for when an individual can be banned from public property, but the point is that it is entirely possible and can be legitimate in certain circumstances. All that said, it is important to understand that an expression of rights cannot be the basis for a trespass from public property so long as the act is not dangerous or disruptive.
In a secured part of the lot.
So where is a sign that says authorized personnel only?
It says police vehicles only.
Yeah, do I have wheels? Or
Fence around it.
I don't have any wheels though.
This is not a public access area. It's over there and up at the front of City Hall, so you're welcome to go to those spots.
Unfortunately, you're incorrect.
Let's go.
I mean, you're saying that sign.
Let's go.
You're not even going to explain it to me?
I will, outside of the secured area.
I don't think you're right.
Okay, I'm not here to argue that.
I'm not here to argue either. I'm just doing an investigative story.
Okay, for who?
I can't tell you that right now because I can't publish it.
So you're not.
It is always important to bear in mind how what you say will reflect later in the courtroom. While making the declaration that you are exercising your First Amendment rights may change the demeanor of the officer, it also has grander implications that extend beyond the interaction itself. Declaring that you are a journalist conducting an investigation adds an element to your case that you must be able to defend in court. And if you are unable to provide evidence of your intent to a judge or jury, it may be construed as nefarious by the other party. Failing to verbally acknowledge that you are exercising your rights can lead to disastrous outcomes if your conduct is challenged in court, as was the case for Auditor Daniel Robbins of Des Moines, Iowa, who lost a federal appeal because he did not expressly state that he was exercising his rights, essentially leaving it to the court to decide what his actual intentions were while filming inside a police parking lot. I have covered Mr. Robbins' interaction in a previous episode, which I will link to in the info card above. Lying about your true intentions will only serve to garner more suspicion from an officer and rob you of merit inside a courtroom. And I encourage being honest with members of law enforcement as often as possible.
Well, why would I be out here on a Sunday?
I don't know. Let's go. You got to step out of here. Let's go. There's a public area over there. Public area right at the front of City Hall.
But there is zero signs saying authorized personnel only.
There's a fence around it. There's a police
it's wide
vehicles
open.
only.
It says police vehicles.
Vehicles in here.
Well, you drive them, but I didn't drive in here.
Let's go.
I walked.
Let's go. Let's keep walking.
As soon as I finish looking at the cars, I will. I have a couple questions actually I'd like to answer those.
Let's go out here.
As soon as I'm done, I'm not done yet.
Let's go out here.
All I have to do is film the rest of the cars here, and that's it.
You can film from back there.
Well, how come there's private vehicles in here? Those police officers' vehicles or what?
Some are investigators. It's all kinds of city vehicles.
Okay.
This is a city lot.
And what's your name and badge number?
Badge number's 81.
What's your name?
Perimeter.
Okay. What's your name and badge number?
96 Sopland. Do you have your ID with you now?
I sure don't.
Why not?
I'm not a public servant. You are.
you're working yourself towards a criminal investigation, which would make me...
For what, though? You say I'm trespassing.
You are getting towards trespassing here. We've asked you to leave. You're not leaving.
But I'm asking you a simple question.
I'm asking you to leave and step outside to where the public is allowed to be, and you're refusing.
I'm trying to talk to you about it because I don't think you're right.
Okay, and we can talk out here.
Let's go over here, and then I'm going to come back in here. I can just... all I can say is that. So who's above you that's here?
I am the supervisor on duty.
Okay, because I've got 2 sergeants now that don't know what they're talking about. All right, here, we're on the other side of this. Police parking only. Now, again, let me ask you a question. If I go around to some of these other doors, you can back up 6 feet.
You have a mask on?
You can back up 6 feet.
I'll put my mask on too.
You can back up for me 6 feet. For my safety and for yours.
So I'm not going to stand in the middle of the parking lot for you.
Okay, well, you can stand over there behind your sign. You're making this very difficult. Okay, and this can go one of 2 ways.
Really?
Yeah, so this can go one of 2 ways, okay? Either A, we can have a respectful conversation and a good dialogue, which I think is important right about now, because this is going to be on the internet.
That's fine.
Or, I've asked you to step away from me 6 feet, for my safety and for yours. Do you have a body cam on you, sir?
Nope, it's running in the car.
Okay, well, where's the car?
There's a car right over there.
Okay, and I'd like you to step over here so I can see you.
I'm fine where I'm at.
Okay, well,
Thank you, though.
Then I'll step over here, since we have a problem.
We put on our masks for you.
I appreciate that. So, number 1, what does the sign say? Can you read this to me?
You can read it just fine. You are shining it with your camera.
Yeah, so does that say police parking only?
It does.
Okay, so where does it say authorized personnel only?
I want you to look at the fence. Look at the fence all the way
And this
around
big
area.
giant hole in the fence, right?
So that police officers can park their squad cars in here.
That's fine. I have no problem with that.
Those are the rules.
Those aren't the rules. The rules are clearly stated right here. It says police parking only. So now we've got kind of a problem, don't we?
Your interpretation of the rules.
It's no. I'm using a very direct. I'm using a very direct. No. You're doing that. You're interpreting it for your agenda. What I'm telling you is this is a very direct sign. It says police parking only. Now I'm asking you, do you see wheels? I'm fast, but not that fast. And I wouldn't run from you either, by the way, just to be clear. I have no ill will. I'm doing an investigative story on a police department that seems to have a problem with that.
We are more than happy to answer questions for you. But you're
Great.
in a secured area.
This is not a secured area. It doesn't even say that. All it says is police parking only.
Although the First Amendment does protect a citizen's right to free speech, those rights are subject to certain limitations. Along with certain time, place, and manner restrictions, the Supreme Court has also outlined certain places which are either acceptable or unacceptable locations for an exercise of free speech. In the 1983 Supreme Court case of Perry Education Association versus Perry Local Educators Association, Justice Byron R. White explained that there were 3 categories of government property for purposes of access for expressive activities: traditional public forums, limited public forums, and non-public forums. Traditional public forums include public parks, sidewalks, and areas that have been traditionally open to political speech and debate. Speakers in these areas enjoy the strongest First Amendment protections. In a limited public forum, the government limits access to a designated public forum to certain classes or types of speech. For example, the government may limit access to public school meeting rooms by only allowing speakers conducting school-related activities. It may not, however, exclude speakers from a religious group simply because they intend to express religious views. Non-public forums are forums for public speech that are neither traditional public forums nor designated public forums. In a non-public forum, the government may restrict contents of a speech, as long as the restriction is reasonable and the restriction does not discriminate based on speakers' viewpoints. Although a location may be considered open to the public, that does not mean that all areas of that location are accessible to the public. For example, a city hall is considered a public building, but that does not mean that citizens may wander into the working areas of city employees. There is no legal precedent which dictates that non-public forums must be officially designated by signage, and areas such as jailhouses, airport terminals, and polling places have been traditionally accepted as non-public forums by the High Court. Given that the police parking area is not accessible to the public for its intended use, it is likely considered a non-public forum, and not an acceptable location for an expressive act. The Eden Prairie officers offered Mr. Mitchell an alternative location for expressing his First Amendment rights, which demonstrates that the officers were not discriminating on the basis of the content of his speech, but more so the location.
I don't know how it could be any more clear than what it says right here. Police, there's 3 words. It's not...
You're obviously trying to...
No, I don't want to. I don't want... You're pushing the issue.
I'm trying to make a reason to get in here and look around, which is fine. You can do that, and I'm telling you what...
You just told me I could. Thank you. That's all. It was that simple.
Now you're manipulating words, but hey, it is
you said you're making a reason to get in here and look around at squad cars, and that's fine. Okay, great. Why are we arguing?
A reason, not... Whatever, I'm not going to play word
games. But I guess I'm just wondering why we're arguing here. Because you came out, you approached me, you wanted to argue with me.
No, but I told you you can't be in this area. You can step out here, we'll talk to you. There's public areas.
I don't want to talk to you. I want to finish doing my investigation.
Okay. And you haven't told us who you're investigating
I don't need to. I'm not required to tell you any of those things because 2 things can happen.
Normal investigators.
I'm going to finish my sentence now. So 2 things happen when you tell somebody what you're doing, okay? Number 1, everything gets flawed and skewed in whatever direction. Okay, now I try to keep it professional. You want to be upset about the fact that your sign doesn't state what you're saying it says. That's one thing, that's on you. But what I'm doing is an investigative story, and I don't need to tell you who I'm doing it for. That's part of the First Amendment.
Normal investigators go...
I'm not a police investigator, so don't get that confused.
They ask for a sergeant, they ask for an officer, they ask for a...
Well, the sergeant came out to me, so I don't need to ask for one. You're here.
A sergeant came out because our officers knew you were in here in a private area.
It's not a private area. It says nothing of privacy. It's on public property, and it says police parking only. I can't be any more specific than what your sign says.
So this is an authorized...
It doesn't say authorized personnel only.
Okay, I'm telling you that...
It doesn't matter what you say, though, officer. That's what I'm trying to tell you. You don't interpret the law. You don't you don't create the law. If the sign says 55 miles an hour, and I come to you and I say, well, you know, it says in the 50s, so I was going 59, and you pull me over. Am I wrong or am I right? It's a very specific sign, right? And it says speed limit, 55 miles an hour. This says police parking only. I can't go drive my car back here and park. I can park in the visitor parking, right? There's visitor parking for those specific things right there, right?
There's also visitor parking here.
Correct. And then that says police vehicles only. So you're telling me I can go over here, but that says police vehicles only as well. So where can I go then? I mean, because that sign to you means I can't be that way. That's what you're saying.
You're obviously here to pick a fight.
No. You came out to pick a fight instead of having a discussion with me. And that was your mistake. Because I just did a video on Edina Police Department. Very professional. Same sign, same everything. Very professional. We had a great conversation. I actually asked for the sergeant to do an interview with him. I don't care. They still have the same sign.
You didn't ask for an interview. You came out.
I didn't get a chance to ask you for an interview because what you came out is you told me the first thing you open up with is you're in a secure area.
So what more do you want to film?
Eventually, the officers allowed Mr. Mitchell to go back into the lot and capture the footage he was after, but that footage is not included in the original video.
Where did the other guy go?
He's going to go take care of some other business.
Okay. Do you have a business card on you?
All set?
Do you have a business card on you?
Yeah. You all set?
Do you have I'm going to ask some questions now. Do you have an ID on you as well, a police ID?
I do.
Sergeant Soppeland gave Mr. Mitchell his card and showed him his police ID, and Mr. Mitchell left the scene without further incident. Following the encounter, Mr. Mitchell conducted an interview with Lieutenant Matt Sackett of the Eden Prairie Police Department and had a productive and civil conversation highlighting improvements that could be made on both sides of the interaction. Overall, the Eden Prairie officers get an A- because although they could have been more cordial while interacting with Mr. Mitchell, they acted within their authority and ultimately allowed Mr. Mitchell to capture the footage he came to film. It is clear that the officers were having trouble articulating to Mr. Mitchell why he was not allowed in the police parking lot. But regardless of their lack of First Amendment knowledge, the officers were right about the limited access available to the public. There is a legitimate argument to be made that the officers could have trespassed Mr. Mitchell from the property due to his refusal to exit the parking lot, but the officers remained relatively level-headed and engaged in a challenging but peaceful dialogue with him instead. Nothing that these officers did was outside the bounds of their authority, and their investigation into Mr. Mitchell's actions was certainly warranted. The Eden Prairie officers did a decent job of balancing their authority with the preservation of Mr. Mitchell's constitutionally protected rights, and I commend them for their patience and professionalism. Mr. Mitchell also gets an A-, because although he displayed a fundamental misunderstanding of public and non-public forums, he remained calm throughout the encounter, engaged in a civil dialogue with the officers, and followed up this interaction by finding common ground with the department in his post-encounter interview. While the First Amendment appears simple when taken at face value, there are many legal complexities surrounding free speech that should be accounted for during any exercise of rights. A surface-level understanding of First Amendment case law will never serve an auditor well, and I encourage all auditors to gain a deeper understanding of the First Amendment before attempting to conduct an audit. Mr. Mitchell's tactic of interviewing department officials after the encounter is extremely respectable, and I believe that is something that all auditors could benefit from. I commend Mr. Mitchell for taking the time to interview the department and turning what could have ended as a simple misunderstanding into a progressive dialogue that both sides could benefit from. Be sure to check out Mr. Mitchell's YouTube channel in the description below and give the Rowdy Podcast your support. Let us know if there is an interaction or legal topic you would like us to cover in the comments below. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more police interaction content.